Nothing is left to superstition. Nothing is left to dogma. They know exactly what they're doing and why. And the moment you know the what and the why, the how starts to get easier. So I will deliver concepts, ideas, mix different forms of science to create a model of understanding. And I now know that if that person, as I develop this model of understanding, can explain that model to someone else, they're wiring it in their brain. They're installing the hardware. If they can't explain it, it's not wired in their brain, and they're not going to believe that they can do it. So if they can turn the person next to them between the two of them and build a model of understanding, they're making their brain fire in new sequences and new patterns and new combinations. They're changing their mind. Mind is the brain in action. If I keep reminding them of what they're learning, nerve cells that fire together wire together. They're installing the circuitry. Now, the next step is to provide the environment and give them the proper instruction to get their behaviors to match their intentions, to get their actions equal to their thoughts, to get their mind and body working together. If they do, they're going to run into a new experience. Now, the crazy thing about the experience is learning is making new synaptic connections. That's what learning is. Research shows that if you pay attention and learn something new and you repeat it just for an hour, you're going to double the number of connections in your brain. That's a lot, 1,600 to the 3,200 connections. That's a lot of extra connections. But if you don't review it, if you don't think about it, if you don't repeat it, those circuits prune apart within hours or days. So if learning is making new connections, then remembering is maintaining and sustaining those connections. You got to review it. It's so much easier to forget than remember when it comes to this stuff, and it's a constant process. So then, if they can get their behaviors to match their intentions, and they have a new experience enriches the philosophical circuits in the brain. But when those neurons string into place, the brain makes a chemical, and that chemical is called a feeling or an emotion. And when you start feeling unlimited, when you start feeling worthy, when you are having an experience that causes you to be more in love with life, it is that chemical release from the limbic brain that teaches your body chemically to understand what your mind has intellectually understood. So if knowledge is for the mind, experience is for the body, and in that moment the person's embodying the truth of that philosophy, and now they're selecting and instructing new genes from the experience because the chemistry that's coming from the environment is information. And so genes make proteins, and all of a sudden they start wearing a different body. Repeat it over and over again. Do anything over and over again. Neurochemically, you'll condition your mind and body begin to work as one. Do it enough times, now your body will know better than your conscious mind. Now it's innate in you. Now it's second nature. Now it's simple. Now you know that you know. You may not know how you do it. You don't know how, but you can do it because it's subconscious now. So now that implicit memory, now you're mastering that knowledge. You're mastering the philosophy. You're becoming the knowledge. You're embodying it so much so that it's automatic, it's effortless, it's easy. So when we started looking at people's ability to regulate their brainwaves, we just published the paper. It just got released yesterday. Our students in our community can do it in 4 seconds, 5 seconds, 9 seconds, 11 seconds. It's not like, hey, I'm getting the divine ahead of you. It's just like they've done it so many times, like it's like driving a stick shift. It's not a difficult thing, but they practiced. And they came up against their blocks. They came up against their limitations. They came up against their frustrations. They came up against their analytical mind, and I want them to in a week-long event, because if not now, when? Now is the new later, and let's do it now, right?
Yes.
So then what we learned when we started studying brains, well, we were doing pre- and post-measurements, and we've got thousands and thousands of brain scans. We have real-time brain scans, too, and when I started seeing people whose brains were getting worse during a meditation, I said to them, what are you doing in there? And 100% of the time, they were analyzing their life or themselves within some disturbing emotion. And if emotions are the record of the past, and those emotions are derived from the hormones of stress, they were thinking in the past. And I learned right in that moment that if I got the person past the emotion, cross the river of change with me, forget about the emotion, just keep overcoming it. Forget about the past. Dragging people out of their past is the work. And so when we started studying those brains and we started seeing changes pre- and post measurements, I realized the change wasn't just in their mind. It was actually in their brain. And that we were measuring different compartments of the brain, and when we're living in stress, and we're living in survival. When the brain is aroused into those high beta brainwave patterns and we're out of balance and we're trying to predict and control everything in our life and we're shifting our attention from one person to another problem, to another thing, to another condition. Every person, every object, every thing, every place has a neurological network in your brain. So as the person was aroused by the hormones of stress like a lightning storm in the clouds, their brain was firing very incoherently. Different compartments were out of sync with other compartments of the brain. And if your brain is incoherent, you're incoherent.